Hey, everybody, and welcome to the second module in our three-part series. We're going to discuss sleep and the senses, strategies to create an environment that encourages sleep. Let's get started. This again is an overview about what we're going to talk about today. So we have the sensory systems, what is regulation and co-regulation, interventions for sleep, so activities for that, and then interventions for sleep in the environment that we can apply. All right, so today we're going to start with our basic senses, and that is sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And I think we all have a lot of experience with these. So let's get into it. So we have the tactile system or our sense of touch, and we all need constant stimulation through touch to help us organize our environment around us. And we gather this information through receptors in our skin. So sensations such as temperature, pain, movement, deep pressure, like touch, vibration, and stretch. So, for example, you can feel a feather on your skin. Auditory or our sense of hearing. So, we use our ears to receive sounds and to modulate those sounds. So, for example, we can hear a loud boom or being able to listen to the teacher even when people are talking in our environment. Next, let's talk about the olfactory system. And it's what we use our nose to smell our environment and food. And for example, this is just smelling a sweet piece of cake. Next, let's talk about our gustatory system. So this is what we use to taste food through the taste buds on our tongue. It's also a protective measure to identify something that maybe isn't safe to eat. So for example, drinking milk and being able to know that it is not right to eat anymore and it's past its expiration date. So you can spit it out. And then lastly, the visual system is one where you use your eyes to identify sights and anticipate what is coming at us to respond. We use it to direct our movement and detect contrast. So, for example, being able to know that a ball is coming towards you and being able to catch it. And these sensations all make up our perception of the world around us. But would you be surprised that this isn't the whole picture? There are some senses that not a lot of people talk about. The three elusive sensations that I'm referring to is the proprioceptive system, vestibular system, and interoceptive system. And y'all have actually had a lot of experience with these systems, even though you might not realize it. So the proprioceptive system, there are receptors in the skin and muscles, but also ligaments, connective tissues, joints, and tendons. When those receptors stretch, they let us know the position of our body parts. So, for example, you may be sitting in a chair right now. It's letting you know where each of your body parts are in connection to that chair, but also to the ground, to the arms of the chair. Next is our vestibular system. The hair cells in our inner ear work almost like a carpenter's level. They note every positional change and head movement. The system tells us where our heads and our body are in space. So, this is a system that lets us know if we're moving, if we're running, and sensing how fast we're running or moving or walking. And lastly, interoceptive system. So there's interoceptors in our body that give us a sense of what our internal organs are feeling. So knowing that our stomach is growling and that we're hungry. So what is regulation and dysregulation? Regulation is being able to use all the senses you're taking in on a daily basis, reacting to them, and then returning to a place of balance in your emotions, mentally and physically. Dysregulation is the exact opposite. So, this is experiencing all those sensations, but being unable to return to an equilibrium. So, again, let's dive into parts of regulation. So, within regulation, there's something called modulation, and this is the ability to adjust responses to sensations. Um, So you can be over responsive, under responsive, or a sensory seeker. And this is all part of dysregulation. So when you're over responsive, it's being very sensitive to sensations in your environment. When you are under responsive, a child can require a lot of stimulation to register senses in their environment. And a sensory seeker is a child that's actively looking for sensory experiences. So in my example, I'm going to give, a lot of people use cups, but I want to use grocery carts. So think of it like this. When you have an over-responsive child, maybe they already come to the table with a grocery basket and it's already very small. So only a small amount of sensation can fill up the basket. When you have an under-responsive child, you might have a large grocery buggy. And it takes a lot of groceries to fill that up. And when you have a sensory seeker, this child is definitely shopping at Costco, so they can buy in bulk. They need a lot of groceries in order to register that they're even getting groceries at all. I know this can be a foreign concept, so I wanted to include some examples of what this would look like in real life. So our first example, craves fast movement and is constantly fidgeting. So this is a sensory seeker. This is a child who is constantly seeking input from the vestibular system. Example 2, avoiding touch from any others or wearing certain clothes. So this is an over-responsive child. So this is a child who is over-responsive to any tactile input or touch sensation. Example 3, ignoring certain sounds or voices. This is describing a child that is under-responsive to any auditory stimulation. Example 4, covering eyes, avoiding eye contact, and being very sensitive to bright light. So this child is over-responsive to any visual stimuli. And then our final example, may not notice being hungry, thirsty, or sick. And again, this child is under-responsive to any interoceptive input inside of their body. Our brain is the control center of our bodies. As discussed in Module 1, we have a stress reaction that is activated by the brain, or more specifically, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is the catalyst for the release of cortisol in our bodies, which is a stress hormone. This is a reaction to the stressors and triggers in our environment from past trauma. This activates our sympathetic nervous system, creating a response. Those who are survivors of trauma often under or over respond to sensory stimulation. Additionally, the amygdala becomes dysregulated as a response to trauma. This impacts the child's ability to cope with majorly and even minorly stressful situations and can produce an automatic response. This can look like extreme reactions to minor stressors on the surface, but is in fact dysregulation. Something is out of equilibrium for these children. All right, we're going to move on to our second topic, which is co-regulation and regulation. Our brain, it has a network chain for regulation. In the model at the bottom, you can see basic needs like heart rate and blood pressure. These things are automatic and controlled by the brainstem. In the middle, we see things like emotional reactivity, and at the very top, we see cognition. These are more complex systems. To unlock these levels, we must begin with regulation of the body in situations in which we feel stress. Finally, the child will have the internal resources to meet the requests and demands of caregivers and their guardians. To put it plainly, we have a part of the brain that guards, a part of the brain that feels, and a part of the brain that thinks. Experiencing trauma only allows us to access our feeling and guarding brain while experiencing dysregulation. This is the part of the brain involved in the stress response. Once we regulate and relate, we can get back to logical thought. So, in situations where your foster child is overwhelmed, start by regulating or calming that stress response. So, this can be accomplished via several co-regulation strategies that we will talk about later in this PowerPoint. Once you notice you have a child's attention and the child has become calm, then relate to how the child is feeling. Meeting the child with empathy fosters a sense of safety and allows the child to access the part of the brain to think logically. This is a point of connection with the child. Then we can finally help the child identify what they are feeling and why. It is also important to note that a dysregulated adult can never regulate a child. All right, so how can we apply this technique in real life? So, our example, your foster child, Sarah, is nearing her bedtime. When you say it's time to go to sleep, she starts to panic. She is noted to begin crying and throws her stuffed animal across the room. She then runs into another room. What do you do? Well, our first step is to regulate. So move the child to a safe and quiet area and begin co-regulation. Once the child is calm, you can then relate. So when you're relating, you can say a number of things, and you're not limited to what I'm about to say, but these are just some examples. So you can say it's okay to feel frustrated that you have to go to sleep. Another example is I'm here to help when you need me. You can also say I get frustrated too when I have to do something I do not want to do. And again, it's all about empathy and connection for the child. You want them to feel understood. Lastly, you can then reason. You can say something along the lines of, I want to be rested. I want you to be rested so that you have the best day tomorrow and do well at school. And then you can follow that up by offering choice. So, do you want to read a book together first or change into your princess PJs? That is then giving some sort of power or autonomy to the foster child again. It's often very, very easy to jump to reasoning above everything else. This is just like driving through a red light. If you chased after her and said, I want you to be rested for school, that part of her brain is not being able to be accessed at that moment. So again, you have to regulate first, then relate and reason. So what can we do about this? How do we encourage regulation? And we do this through co-regulation. So it can be hard for any child, especially children with trauma, to navigate large emotions. Co-regulation is a technique that allows two people to regulate together, one modeling regulation techniques and the other following as an example. It's true that early childhood experiences shape autonomic activity, but it's also true that people can learn this technique to regulate their emotions and response patterns. Our brains are absolutely amazing. They are able to register the emotions of others from our environment. So, as you are co regulating with your foster child, mirror neurons are activated. This means that the child is able to look at the caregiver and mirror their emotions during dysregulation. So, this is one technique you can use to co regulate. It's called the Agile technique. So, it's affect, gesture, intonation, latency, and engagement. And this is just a guideline to keep in mind when you are participating in co regulation. So, for our affect, how is your tone and expressions conveying your emotions? In times of stress, is your affect loving and soothing? Gesture, what do your facial expressions, hand gestures, body movements, posturing, and pacing saying? Intonation. Modulating the tone of your voice helps convey affect and social/emotional meaning. This is felt and understood long before words. Latency. Give the child time to process your affect, gestures, and intonation. And then engagement. Before you continue, make sure the child is engaged. So let's jump into some activities that you can use as foster parents to regulate your children before they sleep. So our first technique we're going to cover is actually breathing. So this involves a voluntary change in rate, quality, and pattern of respirations. It works by reducing heart rate and blood pressure or sympathetic activity from the nervous system. So it basically works by lowering your stress response. And here are three different types of breathing techniques. There are many, many, but these are just the three we're going to cover today. So we have diaphragmatic breathing. So this focuses on breathing into the abdomen and not into the lungs. Next, we have mindful breathing. This involves guided breathing that sustains energy and focus on just breathing. And last, we have resonance breathing, which involves inhales and exhales that are equal lengths with a pause in between. And often all of these techniques are combined. So I have included in this PowerPoint 2 different examples of breathing that you can use with your child. One is for a younger child and one can be for an older child. So we have dandelion breathing, and this works by picturing that you have just picked a dandelion from the grass. So you want to breathe through your nose, hold that breath for 2 seconds, and breathe out of the mouth for 6 counts. So you breathe in 6 through the nose, hold it for 2, and breathe out for 6 counts, imagining that you are blowing all the seeds of the dandelion away. Next is belly breathing. So you can place one hand on your stomach, inhale through the nose for 4 seconds, pretend your belly is a balloon and make it push on your hand, and hold the breath for 2 seconds while then exhaling for 4 seconds. And this is just a good visualization for children when they are learning how to belly breathe, because sometimes that concept is difficult for them to understand. But when you're imagining a balloon, you can imagine the air is filling the balloon and pushing on your hand. So let's talk about guided imagery. So this is our next strategy, and it involves using our imagination. So it's a process of visualizing imagery in the mind. So it combines body relaxation as well as an imagery portion to improve mood and well-being and reduce blood pressure as well as manage anxiety. So there's a couple of steps. So the first step involves body relaxation from the toes to the head. Then you begin the guided imagery. At this step, the child is asked to visualize a place or scenario. And the last step is the child returning back to reality. And this is appropriate for children as well as adolescents. It can be done sitting or laying down as long as they are relaxed and comfortable. So a child can do this on their own or through an audio recording, or it can be facilitated by a caregiver. So it's really, really similar to daydreaming, and that's what makes it so fun, is they can pick their favorite place and picture themselves there. So I've provided an example that I want us to watch just for a little bit. So feel free to close your eyes.
Make yourself comfortable. Take a big, deep breath in through your nose and slowly and gently breathe out through your mouth. Take another deep breath in and slowly and gently breathe out
So
through
this
your
is
mouth.
the first phase.
One last time. Deep breath in and slowly and gently breathe out through your mouth. You can hear the sound of them coming up.
So this is phase 2.
You can even smell the ocean spray. That lovely
And
smell
again,
you can
the
only
child's
find
eyes would be
at the
closed.
beach. You come to the end of your path now, and you see before you the brilliant deep blue colour of the ocean. And you can hear.
All right, so that's just an example. And at the end of this PowerPoint, I've included several audio examples of what you could play for your child. But again, you can make your own. And as you can see how this would be very relaxing for a child and even fun, because it's just like playing pretend or daydreaming. So our next technique we're going to cover is progressive muscle relaxation, or PRM. This is a deep muscle relaxation technique that's proven to reduce anxiety, stress, and insomnia. The technique itself does this by lowering heart rate, decreasing blood pressure, and slowing down our breathing patterns or our respirations. It involves tensing one muscle at a time, followed by a relaxation phase of releasing that tension. The relaxation phase is often longer than the active phase. So, for example, holding a pose for 5 seconds and then relaxing for 15. So I have created a sample script that involves going from the toes to the face. It can be as creative as you want it to be. For older children, this technique can be taught and facilitated by them themselves if it's something that they find useful in their lives. Let's go ahead and practice this specific script. And I really do encourage you to do this with me. So I know you can't see my toes, but pretend you're a parrot on a branch in the rainforest and squeeze your toes and hold on to that branch. Squeeze for 5 seconds and then relax. And then you would prompt the child to relax for 15 seconds. So for our legs, remember the feeling when you squeezed your toes? Now try on your lower leg. So squeeze your calf, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Hold for 5 seconds and then relax. Then your upper legs, you do your upper legs, you can stick them straight out. Let's do our stomach. So squeeze your stomach hard like armor. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you relax for 15. Hands. So you would act like you're squeezing a ball in each hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then relax. All right. Reach your arms above your head and try to touch the stars. So you reach all the way up. Reach, reach, reach. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then relax. Head and shoulders. So try to make your shoulders touch your ears like someone's tickling you. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then down, relax. And then for the face, make the silliest faces you can think of, then relax. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That, of course, was a condensed version of what you would show your child. And below this video, I'm going to link a full version of me doing this script so that if you need a reminder of how to do it, you can refer to that instead of watching this whole video again. But you can make it as fun as you want it to be. It really is relaxing as if you participated, you felt, and it's fun. So let's move on to autogenic training. So this involves visualizing heaviness and warmth of the legs and arms. It's followed by the strength of the organs, heart, and breathing. This technique can reduce stress, hyperarousal, and increase self-regulation, which is what we want. It can be done lying down or sitting. The eyes should be closed while completing this technique, and you can follow a recording or repeat the steps to yourself. So often what I've found with this technique is when you hear a recording of this, you can repeat it in your brain, inside your mind, or you can just listen and follow along with what it's telling you. So I'm going to quickly go over a script or kind of outline what a script would be. So you have a couple of steps, and all scripts are different. And again, I've linked one at the end of this video that may work for you. And if it doesn't, there's plenty of resources out there. But you want to choose a quiet spot. Step 1 is heaviness in the arms. So you would listen to this. My right arm, forearm, and hand are getting heavy. I'm feeling heaviness in my right arm, forearm, and hand. My left arm, forearm, and hand are getting heavy. I'm feeling heaviness in my left arm, forearm, and hand. So then you were to repeat this onto the legs. Then you would move on to warmth in the arms, warmth in the legs, strengthen our heart, strengthen breathing, strengthen the visceral organs, coolness of the forehead, and then finishing. And this is just really visualizing relaxation. And again, this one will take some practice, so it may be more appropriate for older children. So our final activity to facilitate sleep in children through regulation is yoga. I think we've all heard of yoga, and basically it provides proprioceptive input organizing our system. So it's found to actually reduce stress, anxiety, and increase coping skills in some children. Practicing yoga while deep breathing can move the child from a state of fight or flight into a state of rest and renew. So this is one of those techniques you combine breathing, some of the techniques we talked about earlier, belly breathing, bring it into yoga. So generally you want to hold the poses for 2 to 3 minutes while deep breathing. This can be facilitated by watching a video, reading a yoga storytime book together, or modeling the poses for your foster child. So some examples of that are the tree pose, mountain pose, and butterfly pose. And again, I've linked some resources at the end of this for some ideas for some yoga poses. Environmental strategies for sleep. So the first environmental strategies we're going to talk about have to do with the proprioceptive system, which we talked about early on in this PowerPoint. So you can utilize a weighted blanket. So guidelines, it has to be 10% of weight. So for example, if your child is 100 pounds, 10-pound weighted blanket is appropriate. You can use spandex PJs and sheets, tucking the sheets in on both sides of the mattress so that when they roll, they're getting input. Again, 2 body pillows on each side for compression. Roll in a blanket. So this is rolling the child up like a burrito. And again, getting that deep pressure input, and bubble mountain at bath time. So again, you have a bubble mountain, you have them blowing out the bubbles. So our next strategies we're going to cover is auditory. So you can do a sound machine, and that can have white noise on it. You have a fan, which actually has a dual purpose. It can cool the child off, making it easier to sleep, but also provide some auditory stimulation. Soothing music, you can do a noise door blocker if the noise outside their room is impacting their sleep, or you can do even noise blocking curtains if you live on a more noisy street. Next, we have vestibular and visual strategies. So this includes linear, rhythmical rocking in a rocking chair or hammock in a quiet place. I would caution against any fast movement because this can actually cause arousal or increase energy in the child around bedtime. So limiting blue light exposure, a night light, blackout curtains, or darkening shades to reduce the light in the room, and dimming the lights in the room or house as bedtime approaches. Okay, our last strategies we're going to talk about is implementing choice. And this is just some ideas. There might be some ideas for your child that are more appropriate or something that they would prefer more, but I would definitely consider using a baby monitor for nighttime awakenings or a walkie-talkie, allowing the child to control the lighting in their room. So if they want a night light on, they can have it, or a bathroom light or a closet light. Do they want the door open or closed? If they have a comfort item, do they want that comfort item? Allowing foster siblings to sleep in the same room if it's appropriate. And allowing the child to choose PJs, bath toys, and what to read during bedtime. Allowing the foster child to have input on these choices is empowering to them when the situation could feel powerless. It's important to note that every foster child is unique around sleep, and everyone has unique sensory needs. On top of that, everyone's trauma presents uniquely. So every intervention in this PowerPoint that is covered will not be appropriate for your child, and that is perfectly okay. It is important to gain context about your foster child's former sleep environment via the social worker or the guardian to gain a better understanding about them and choose the best sleep strategies possible. So let's go ahead and test what you know. So I'm going to read through a scenario question and walk you through the reasoning behind the correct answer after you have answered. So Jamie is a 10-year-old who, when it's around bedtime, is go, go, go. He is constantly running around in a state of hyper arousal. What are some strategies you think would be helpful for Jamie to facilitate sleep? So go ahead and pause the video and think over some strategies that we discussed in this module. Once you've gathered a few, go ahead and play the video again. So basically, anything with deep pressure to organize the proprioceptive system. So it could be progressive muscle relaxation or yoga. As for environmental strategies, you can try a weighted blanket, spandex sheets, and at bath time using a straw to blow a bubble mountain. Additionally, limiting blue light or dimming the lights can encourage the body to produce melatonin, and that might be a strategy that you want to try. That was so good. So let's move on to scenario question number 2. Angel is an 8-year-old who has a lot of fear around bedtime. She is often leaving her room after her bedtime routine is complete. You know that at her biological parents' house, she is used to a lot of other family members being present. So again, pause the video and feel free to look back through the module to gather interventions that would work for this specific child. As mentioned before, asking the social worker additional information about sleeping arrangements can be very helpful. Promoting the feeling of safety is incredibly important and can be done through providing a walkie-talkie, replicating a comfort item, a nightlight, or soothing music. You can also consider breathing exercises to reduce that sympathetic activity and to calm the child's fight or flight response. And again, I would remember that it may not be appropriate to use some interventions like a weighted blanket if the child does not like it and it's panic inducing. Thank you so much for joining us today. Go ahead and click the link at the bottom of this video to take the quiz and be directed to our third module, which is increasing independence and confidence around sleep through choice. We hope that you found this module very helpful and got some ideas for some interventions to try with your foster child to facilitate sleep. Thank you again, and we hope to see you in the third module.